They're eating the pets.
Tastes like chicken.
That should do it.
That should do it. Hey guys, welcome to The Saint and the Singer, where I'm the saint.
And I'm the singer.
Because you don't want me singing.
And you don't want me sainting.
You could actually be a saint.
Ooh. Saint. What would I be the saint of if we were Catholics?
Flatulence.
So tonight, we are discussing our favorite thing to talk about, politics.
That was sarcasm, by the way.
Politics and how it relates to our faith journey. Would that be a good expression of what we're going to talk about?
Yeah. And as Christians, what does that mean for us in the realm of politics?
Right. And we're going to look at it as a choice between a donkey and an elephant and a lamb. Right?
Yep.
Something along those lines. Okay. So where do we want to start this conversation?
Well, so we're talking about this because of last night's debate, really. As, we are in the midst of...
We are in election season.
And so that kind of throws everything to the forefront.
Yeah.
Once more.
Well, and you go and you look on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it these days, or Facebook or Instagram or whatever the kiddos are using today, Squatter, Squitter, Flapper, whatever. And you see a news piece. I have no idea what that meant. You see a news piece and then you start reading the comments, which is really the entertaining part.
That really, truly is.
But then, the question kind of comes to a thinking person's mind of like, really, how do I really approach this, especially from a believer? And I'm going to start, I think, this conversation, if you're okay with it, with how should we as Christians approach politics first? Okay. And so I will tell you how I approach politics, which I'm not endorsing for every human on the planet. We're all different, but this is how I choose to look at politics. And like everything that we refer to in every podcast, I think we have to hold our politics and our faith in tension.
Sure.
So as a believer, I want the government to be run by people with Christian ethics and morals, because I personally feel like that's the best way to go through life. Where we get into danger there is a theocracy, to where unless you believe like the person who's in charge, are you treated as lesser than, or are you penalized, or are certain people that do believe like you? Well, we're just sounding like politics anyway. We're just took the religion out of it. But so the way I personally look at it is, I think those are two separate things. They can be related, but they still have to be kept separate. So for me personally, I'm a proponent of traditional marriage. I don't think I've made that a secret ever. I believe that that's how God created us, and that's the standard, so to speak. That's the goal. Now, from a faith-based standpoint, I think we have to hold tight to that. But when it comes to a civil government, I don't personally have a huge issue with two people who are of the same sex having their civil ceremony and getting to take advantage of the same, tax breaks, legal things. So, sure. Being able to visit their loved one in the hospital, or being able to make medical decisions for their loved ones, that sort of thing. I don't personally have a problem with that. I don't see those as the same thing, because Now, where was I going with that?
Well,
I'm keeping those things separate.
yeah.
And where that attitude falls apart is when you look at things like abortion, and that is that's a hard thing to look at. I think as a Christian, we should want abortion to be as rare and only necessary as possible. I don't think it should be a birth control method. I don't think it should be an oops, I made a mistake sort of thing. This should be, I was raped and impregnated, or I'm going to lose my life, or my wife is going to lose her life as a result of this pregnancy. And that's about it. Other than that, it's taxpayers are paying for your irresponsibility. And so where do we draw the line at that? Because are we supposed to be involved in the process? But to what end? And how deep does that go?
Okay, so we first have to understand that when Scripture was written, the concept of a representative republic, I'm not going to call us a democracy because we're not actually a democracy.
Right.
Yes, whilst the Roman did have a republic of sorts, it was only really for 1/3 of the population.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really wasn't the same as what we were experiencing.
As what we see here.
As what we see in the last 200 and almost 50 years. So we have to recognize that the idea of concept of government is going to be different scripturally, for one thing, than what we are experiencing when they're talking about. So I'll just start it out there. I'll use Romans 13, 1-7. Okay. So here, Paul is talking to Roman citizens. He is talking to believers that are in Rome. Some of them are of Jewish nature. Some of them are, Gentile. But he's giving them this information to deal with the Roman Empire. Now, let's remember, the Roman Empire is the same one that, at this point is lighting them on fire for Nero's garden parties and things like that.
At that point, the temple is gone.
Well,
or
yeah,
is it?
There's chances are at this point, this is probably just before the temple is destroyed.
Just before. Okay.
It's probably the late 60s when this is going on. So I think Nero actually happens a little bit after this. But there was already persecution happening. We know of that. And partly we know that the Jews had actually left Rome at this point. A lot of them had because of racism and things like that.
Okay.
But here's what he says. Everyone must submit to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist are instituted by God. Let's just stop there for a second. So that means that communist China, Little Rocket Man
in North Korea. Putin,
is it Maduro in Venezuela?
Yes.
Yeah. All of those are also instituted by God.
Boy, that's a hard pill to swallow.
It is. I know.
Do we go to Chairman Mao and Stalin and Hitler? Mussolini? I have a hard time buying that. I mean, I know I don't have a hard time buying that Scripture says that, but I'm not sure that's the heart of God. Does that sounds more like man taking for himself things he doesn't deserve?
I think that we have a sovereign God, and so
yes, I guess that if you're looking at it from that perspective, nothing happens without his
allowance of things to go. Yeah. That doesn't mean that he approves of it.
Right.
It doesn't mean that he supports it.
Would you say that is equivalent to him? What is the phrase that always comes up? Turning them over to their own evil desires, and actually, basically.
That starts out in the early part. That's the first chapter of Rome, where it talks about letting them turn over to their own depravity.
Yeah. Well, and it happens all through the Old Testament, too. I mean, that's at some point, that's the reason the flood happens and everything else was because he had let them over to their own devices and they just went, bleh.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so continues on.
Sorry, that rabbit
I
hole.
feel like that was important to kind of point out. It is a difficult.
That's a
thing.
tough teaching,
It is.
and it does make you wonder. It's like, are you talking about benevolent government, or are you talking about,
He's talking about
people
the
who kill
Roman
millions, right?
Again,
right?
So he is talking about an empire that killed millions.
Yeah. Okay.
So then the one who resists the authority is opposing God's command, and those who oppose it will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do good, and you will have its approval. For government is God's servant to you for good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, because it does not carry the sword for no reason. For government is God's servant, an avenger that brings wrath on the one who does wrong. Therefore you must submit not only because of wrath, but also because of your conscience. And for this reason you pay taxes, since the authorities are God's public servants, continually attending to these tasks. Pay your obligations to everyone, taxes to those you owe taxes, tolls to those you owe tolls, respect to those you owe respect, and honor to those you owe honor.
I got a problem with all of that.
It's a tough passage.
Well, what do you do if the government that he's speaking of or that you're living under doesn't reflect what he's speaking about, though? Because it talks about the government being a force for good and punishing the bad. And if you're good, if you're doing good or you're doing well, you have nothing to fear. Or what if you have a evil dictatorship that's the exact opposite of that?
I think what Paul is saying here is don't return evil with evil.
By the way, this was not what we're supposed to be talking about.
Well, we will.
But we'll get there. We'll get there, but we're
are.
going down a rabbit hole now.
You don't return evil with evil. And the point is that if we say that we are a believer in Jesus and that we are his disciple, then we must live differently than the world around us. And so it's a matter of then giving a higher level of honor and respect with the intention of showing them that there's something more than just the way the world works, the way the world lives.
Okay.
So here's the thing though. You're dealing with, people that get thrown into prison for their faith. I mean, Paul is talking about this and he's actually writing this from prison in most like cases, and so he's understanding this much deeper than we are, but he's still saying, even though the Roman Empire, in this case, that is a beast, basically, it is a monster.
Right.
God has allowed it to be there, and we need to live our life differently.
Okay. So in the Old Testament, we'll go back to Old Testament a bit. God used invading forces to punish
Judges.
the Israelites for their lack of obedience or their adultery. Was Rome a punishment to Jerusalem for their adultery? Do you think?
I think that in 70 AD, yes. That because at that point, that was God showing that this is no longer my system. This is no longer, what my plan has moved past this.
Okay.
I don't necessarily think that it wasn't just a punishment, but because you got to think of this. So there's a reason why Jesus comes in the middle of the Roman Empire, and even within just 30 years of his birth, at that point in about 30 some odd BC. We see the postal service is enacted across the whole Roman Empire. We see roads all across the empire that allows for movement of information.
The message,
but also it allows for the movement of people groups. This is going to be very important. At this point, we have a unified language.
Nerd alert.
Yeah, pretty much. So by 30 BC, most of the known world spoke Greek. So now there's a unified language that can be spoken. And so now Jesus comes within 30 years of all this being enacted, which now allows the message to spread like wildfire.
There's a pretty good argument there then. Okay.
So God used the Roman Empire to spread his message. He used their, hard work and their
Okay.
civil institutes.
So I'm just going to keep playing devil's advocate for a minute because A, it's one of my favorite things to do, and B, truly these are some questions that need to be asked. Then okay, so based in light of the scriptures that you just read, the Revolutionary War was sinful and should never have happened.
That is why John Adams actually went to King George after his presidency and apologized and said, "I have to ask for forgiveness for being a part of this." But I would say that also yes, so there was a disrespect of authority, but I do believe that there is a caveat of still trying to do something better. If you're going to live as a Christian believer, we have the right to stand up for what God believes. So if we're in communist China or in North Korea or during Stalin and the USSR, as a believer, and Nazi Germany, you think of
Corey.
Well,
No, not Corey.
I was thinking of what is that pastor that that dies at 37?
Yes.
I cannot believe I just blinked on his name. Bonhoeffer.
Yeah.
Dietrich Bonhoeffer. That's what I was. I was trying to put the D in his last name. I couldn't figure out how that was working.
Yeah.
Yeah. They stood up for what they believed, not disrespectfully.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
His civil disobedience was not disrespect.
Right.
It wasn't with violence. It was with kindness.
Right.
So I think that there is something that allows for civil disobedience and Christian, even under this passage, it's a matter, are you doing it in a way that it's honoring God and honoring others?
Well, and that comes to maybe the next scripture I was going to have you read, which was the John? Because I was...
My kingdom was not...
Yeah, and so one of the things... oh, wait, that's me. Never mind.
That was yours. But...
one of the things I think about how we need to approach our politics and our religion is to keep our faith in proper perspective with our politics. So in light of that conversation, we are to live to please God, regardless of our government or its structure or its people.
Right.
So the next thing I was going to get into was, what if you don't like the government you live under now? How do we approach that? Because we're in a very divisive situation politically. As Christians, as conservatives, or someone who's it's usually not great to tell everybody where you lay politically in public, but I lay in the middle somewhere between Democrats and Republicans. I'm not quite libertarian enough to be considered really a libertarian, but I like aspects about either side and I hate aspects about either side. So I'm not going to say I'm a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm an independent, but I'm somewhere in the middle between those two. So I don't feel like I have as much of a propensity to maybe get involved on one side or the other and get mad at one side or the other. I stay mad at both of them pretty much.
Yeah, they all annoy me.
Both sides. I think for the majority of the time they all suck. But at the end of the day, we can try to influence our political realm to a point, but we're also, at the end of the day, really called to live for Christ, who is,
correct,
spoiler alert, the lamb, not the donkey, not the elephant. And so I was thinking about how if you can look at your life through that lens, then it keeps you from doing the two main things that we would tend to do if we're to get out of line of God's will. So if we're focusing on the lamb instead of the other two, we are less likely to make politicians or politics our idols, which is a huge temptation, especially in election years. Is, we were joking up front, Trump's going to save us. Kamala's going to be the best thing that's ever happened to the world. Neither of those things is true. Trump is not going to save us. Now, can it be argued that our lives can be improved by Trump and his policies? Yes. Is there a potential that our lives can be better under Kamala's policies? Maybe. I don't see it, but that I've been wrong before. So I can tell myself and remind myself to remain neutral in that no matter who ends up in the White House in January of 2025, the real king of the universe is unchanged.
Correct.
And it is in him that we put our hope.
Yep.
Not a Republican or a Democrat, no matter what their name is. And I think there is a real danger of us getting either too involved in politics or maybe disengaging completely and just watching the world burn.
Yeah, I remember when Barack Obama in 2012 won the election, and I remember some of my friends that were just so focused on that election, thinking that it was going to be the end of the world, depending on how that ended, one way or the other. And the truth is, it didn't. And then
every election that's ever happened since we've been paying attention is that this one is the one that's going to change.
And it's going to destroy democracy or make democracy.
And other than our expenses on a monthly basis being lower or higher, not much else about our life has really changed.
Correct.
Now, is it frustrating that everything's more expensive and it's harder to live? Yes, it is frustrating.
Inflation's annoying.
But if we take that out of the picture, how's the quality of your life changed?
If I get involved in politics a lot, it gets more stressful.
Right.
But otherwise, when I stop
stay
caring,
focused on
my
it,
life
right.
is so much better.
So there's an argument for disengaging
bit.
from that process to an extent.
To a degree.
I think it's dangerous to get too involved, and I think it's maybe dangerous to get not involved enough.
Yeah,
to where at least you're exerting some influence on policy.
Yeah, I don't think that I should just stick my head in the sand as a believer and say I'm never going to look at, and I'm never going to do an election, or I'm never going to do it, because I don't think that's right either. I mean, partly because we're supposed to be, I think we're supposed to engage in the government to some degree. I'm not going to ever run for an office.
Right.
Unless God says, dude, it's time for you to run for office. And he's probably going to tell me like 12 times, because that's the last thing I want to do.
Like Moses, and before he goes in front of
it'll
Pharaoh,
take 40 years,
deny him 5 times and say, no, I'm not going to,
I need a burning bush experience before I might even consider, running for an office. Yeah. But, and that's okay. I mean, I respect those that do.
Right.
And
we want to encourage, obviously, good, honorable people with integrity to be
absolutely
in our politics.
Unfortunately, I'm afraid that politics tends to take those honorable, people and either break them or change them,
chew them up and spit them out. Yep.
Because I think you're dealing with, when you're dealing with power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Well, when I think about the way we should approach politics in some respects, I always go back to John 18, where Jesus is talking to Pilate before the crucifixion, and starting in I'll just read 33 through 40. It's kind of a long read, but it kind of lays out the context a little bit better than me just saying what I think I'm going to say. So, starting in verse 33 of chapter 18 of the Gospel of John, so Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" And Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from the world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him, but you have a custom that I should release one man to you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. So
I am Barabbas.
Yeah, that sounds like I eat the rabbits. So my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. So the way I look at that is, as an apprentice of Jesus, the kingdom that I belong to is also not of this world.
Right.
It is separate from the kingdom of America, Missouri, Monette, whatever. It is superior to this kingdom, and it outweighs the desires of this kingdom. So we can participate in this earthly kingdom, but not to the point where it supersedes our ultimate kingdom.
Right. And I think that's where that civil disobedience comes in.
Right. And that's where I get, we're going to focus on the lamb, not the donkey or the elephant, or I don't know what the other ones do. But and I was going to say there was something in 19 that I read a minute ago that I thought was pretty nice too. Oh, yes, we were talking about that. So in 19, verse, we'll start in 10. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" And Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin."
Which that goes back to, I think, Romans 13:1.
Yep.
When you think about where does the power and authority come from?
Yep.
Yeah, this is a tough situation. I mean, as a Christian, I choose to vote my conscience. But sometimes I look at elections and I'm like, I don't like either one. Like, is Mickey Mouse an option?
I have voted third party several times just because I didn't like either of the two choices that were going to win. Yeah. And I didn't think I wanted to have that on my conscience, really, because I didn't believe either one of them would do great. And I think that's okay. Some people think that's stupid and wasteful, and I think it's stupid and wasteful to vote on somebody who you don't truly think is going to be the best person. We have 350 million people in our country, and the choices that we've had the last couple of decades are supposed to be the smartest people, the best, the brightest. I don't know about that.
They're at least the loudest and the most photogenic.
Right. So, to some respects, I look at it as kind of silly. Our politics are kind of silly. And you can say that, they have kingdom consequences. And I wouldn't argue with you that they have kingdom consequences or that they're serious things. But the way that we approach it as general citizens is not much different than electing student council in middle school or homecoming queen or whatever. And it's last night's debate is a prime example of that. I didn't watch the whole thing. Frankly, it bored me to death. But the hour of it that I watched was absolutely devoid of any substance. It was absolutely devoid of any plans by either party. It was just, you're incompetent. No, you're incompetent. No, you're a jerk. No, you're a jerk. No, you're this. You're this. It's like, tell me something that you're going to do to actually improve all of our lives. And nobody will tell you that, because I think it's because they know that's not what people want to hear.
Yeah.
People that think about politics all the time, who I would argue border on worshiping politicians or politics or government.
It's definitely idolatry.
Put too much effort into it and too much mental capacity into it, and they don't spend nearly as much time probably reading the Bible or thinking about the Bible or praying as they do worrying about politics. And I think that shows now that it's just down to, like you said, a popularity contest.
Right.
And so I think we can do better, but we have to actually try to do better. And, we had a half-hearted discussion before I hit record there about how, I choose to look at it as if I want the best for the country. That's what I want. Actually, I want the best for the world, but I only have a vote in this country. So from my personal perspective, I want the best for our country. I want the smartest people up there. I want the most honest people up there, people with integrity, people who will do the right thing for the country no matter where that idea comes from. We have people on the left that have great ideas. We have people on the right who have great ideas. I want us to get back to this guy hears that this guy or gal has a wonderful idea, and he says, that's a wonderful idea. I'll vote for that when it comes up for vote in the Senate. And they go, thank you for your support. We'll do the best for the country. Instead, I didn't have
that was kind of like the Muppets version.
I should have taken my socks off. But instead, what we have is, I have a great idea. Well, if I vote for your idea, you get points and I don't, and that's bad for my party. So now it is our job to do what's best for the parties and not for the people.
Well, and that's why George Washington warned very clearly. This is, that this will not work. This idea, this government in a two-party system.
Right.
And he was absolutely. And here's the thing: what we're experiencing today, this divisiveness, is nothing new. If you go back to Hamilton and Jefferson, I mean, the things that those the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists said against each other, I mean, they were having duels in the street.
Your mother was a gopher. Such insults.
And then they would shoot you, and they were, getting tarred and feathered. I mean, we have to recognize that this divisiveness that we're experiencing now isn't really new.
Yeah.
It is amped up, I think, in the last 20 years from back, but even in the 80s, you had your Reagan economics, and you had, I don't remember even who now at that point with who the Democrat, party was, but there was always, constant discussion and debate and arguments among people. And I think, I think the arguing is not helpful for a Christian. I also do not believe that, from the pulpit, we should be pushing one political party or another. And that's the issue that I'm seeing with evangelical Christianity, I think, in many ways. Or like, well, we've got to follow this person because this person's going to save the country. No,
the Savior that we worship is going to save the country.
And here's another thought.
That's a great point. I wasn't really planning on talking about that, but from the pulpit,
you'll never hear me say one party or another.
That's a dangerous situation. Yep. Absolutely.
And here's another thought that I just had. If you look at the church, the universal church, the body of Christ, it is growing the fastest in the countries where it's illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that for a second. So it's communist China, it's Iran, it's Jordan, it's Saudi Arabia, countries where there is pushback to be a believer, and that is where the church is growing the fastest. Maybe our freedom of religion that we have here has actually been a detriment to the church, not a help.
We're certainly too comfortable. I say that a lot. As Christians, we're too comfortable.
We don't, and the truth is I think this is one of Satan's greatest tools, because we've never had to experience true pushback and persecution. And so what ends up happening is we are all comfortable, everything's hunky-dory, we're like, oh, God is blessing us, and then something bad happens.
We fall apart.
And it falls apart, and we're like, oh, this is too much, this is too uncomfortable. I don't want to stick it out. And so this isn't the God that I follow or whatever. And we look at Europe and we can see, the beautiful history of the church there, the monasteries and the cathedrals, and yet it's almost empty because of all of the European. I mean, the vast amount of Europeans that are considered the nuns,
secular.
They're secular humanists, and they're they know about God and they know about Jesus, but they don't serve Jesus.
So what was our last scripture?
Our last one kind of goes back to, it's about taxes, and I think
I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah. So to clarify that, the religious are trying to trick Jesus into saying something against Caesar. So here's what he says. But detecting their craftiness, he said to them, "Show me a denarius. Whose image and inscription does it have?" "Caesar's," they said. Well, then he told them, "Give back to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." They were not able to catch him in what he said in public, and being amazed at his answer, they became quiet. So
that goes back to holding your faith and your politics in some tension.
Yeah, I mean,
so give to God what is God, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and then leave the rest of it up to whatever.
Sure.
Okay.
If in an ideal world, I would love for the freedom of religion that we have on paper to truly be applied across the board. To not be afraid of praying in public. I think that sounds great in theory, but I recognize that's also not where the world is going. Having read Revelation, there will be a cost to follow the Lamb. And whether I vote for the donkey or the elephant isn't going to change where the world will head. It might slow it down for a time.
Yeah.
In my own ideas, in my own eyes, but not in God's plan.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna start some closing thoughts, and you feel perfectly welcome to interject your closing thoughts in amongst mine. But so as it relates to donkey, elephant, or lamb, here are some things we can keep in mind during this contentious season.
Sure.
Christ tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves.
For sure.
And to love our enemies. Those
political
enemies are included in that.
Yes.
So you're welcome to disagree, but I think keep it as cordial as you can and understand that we're called to love our friends and our enemies. Okay?
And I would add one, in our discussions, at some point you might have to just dust the sand off your feet and move on.
Sure. But you can do that in a respectful manner. Absolutely. Okay. Kingdoms fall. Civilizations crumble. We will be not immune to that either.
Correct.
If this is the election in which our society crumbles, we can do nothing about it.
Yep.
Our hope,
the U.S. is not in Revelation.
Our hope is in the saving power of Jesus Christ, not in the saving power of Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or whoever it is 4 years from now, 8 years from now, 12, 16, whatever. At the end of the day, kingdoms fall, but the ultimate king will never be removed from the throne. So when I will be honest, I will from time to time get a little too involved in reading the news and reading about politics, and I have to remind myself that, okay, no matter who's in the White House, my God is still on the throne regardless. So keep that in mind. We are not here forever. This is our temporary home, or at least in this form, it's our temporary home. We can talk about what does heaven look like one of these days, and are we even going there? But that's a different story for today. Any other takeaways from this discussion?
I think that if we keep ourselves focused on the Lamb, we won't allow the politics and the anxiety that comes with that. I think we can really be much more relaxed. And there's something to find peace when all around you is chaos.
Yeah.
I think that in many ways makes a great witness.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that a Christian shouldn't put a Trump sign in their front yard or a Harris Waltz sign in their front yard. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do that, but it does mean you shouldn't put more importance on that than you put on your spiritual life. And I think we have a real propensity to confuse those two to a point, and to where we might even flip-flop those from time to time and confuse them for what they are. Politics is an earthly thing that is temporary and is constantly changing.
Yeah.
Our God is the opposite of that.
Our God is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts?
Good luck.
Yeah. Go register. Go vote.
Vote.
Go do your civic duty. Pick the people that you think will do the best, and then leave it at that.
And I would argue,
do not put your identity into that. That's the other danger. Is we have to put our identities we have to keep our identities separate from our politics. Yeah. We have a real danger of also making that our identity. I am a Republican. I am a Democrat. Are you?
No,
I'm a Christian. Are you just a person who happens to lean a certain direction in your political leanings? So we have to be even careful about our language when we talk about politics or anything else. Like, our identity is a child of God,
right?
Not a Republican or a Democrat or a Libertarian or whatever. That's not who you are. That's how you choose to look at the world around you.
Yep.
So just keep that in mind as you're navigating this minefield of political seasons that just happens to happen every 2 years, and it gets really crazy every 4. But thank you.
Welcome to the crazy train.
Yeah, welcome to the crazy train. But we thank you for watching and for joining us tonight. And we would love for you to join us in person on Sunday mornings at 10:15 here at 700 West East. I don't know. Sometimes Google gets it mixed up. Sometimes it says West Sycamore. Sometimes it says East. So we're just going to say 700 Sycamore here in Monette. We also meet at 6:30 to 8 on Wednesday nights, except for coming up, we're going to start at 5:30 to have some grub before we start all this stuff. So that'll be an up.
We're also starting Sunday school this weekend.
We'll update that. Oh yeah, we got Sunday school starting this Sunday at 9:15. 9:15.
With a little pre-worship at 9:00.
Yeah, we're just doing stuff. We're just doing stuff here. And if you want to be part of I would say a vibrant community of worshipers who really take seriously our call to minister to the world around us and to each other, then I think this might be a place you would like to be. So come join us. And
We're like Olive Garden. Hear your family.
Now, if we had unlimited salad and breadsticks,
I think that would be
I'd be all right with that.
Would, take that, gospel one level above right there.
Anyway, next week we will be talking about something completely different than this.
And we don't know yet.
Yeah, we never know what we're talking about till we hit record. And then, like just happened tonight, we had a sort of a very rough outline of what we're going to talk about, and then immediately went outside of that and went completely different directions. So join us as we do this trapeze act without a net.
Without a net.
Yeah. Sometimes we fall, and if we fall hard enough, I'll edit some pieces out. Anyway, thank you guys for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Have a good one.